What are OKRs? OKR stands for Objectives and Key Results, but what does that even mean? How does this work? This is a question that I get asked quite often by clients and by people who follow me, and just by people around the place. People have heard of OKRs, they've heard of people using objectives and key results, they've heard of Google using them, they've heard of many startups using them around the place. They've heard that they're great, that they help them, and so on. They've heard all sorts of magical solutions that are associated with OKRs. But what is this thing? So in this video, I'm going to go into this in a bit of detail. I'm going to just use this little icon here, this little diagram of OKRs, because it is an image that represents what the OKR looks like, but I'll explain that as I go through. So what are OKRs, or objectives and key results? Well, it starts out with a time constraint. We're talking about what we're going to get done in a specific time constraint. Normally it's a quarter. We then add what we will achieve. That's the objective. This is the thing we're trying to actually do in this quarter. Then we define success. We have the definition, we have the metrics, the milestones, whatever it means to be really specific about success. And finally, we set an owner. We might set an owner for the overall objective or for individual key results, but somebody is the one person who's responsible for pulling together the plan and making sure it's getting done. Now, they don't necessarily manage everything. They might be quite cross-functional. In fact, that's ideal, but yeah, that's what you're doing. Right. So let's get into a bit more detail with this. Let's give an example here. In the time constraint in Q4, the objective, the thing we're going to try and do, we will scale up our sales machine. The key results as measured by the, I can't read this on my screen, average monthly webinar attendance increase from 10 to 100, increase initial meetings with qualified leads per month from 2 to 5, increase conversion rate of qualified leads to sale from 15 to 30%, and sign our first no-touch trial customer. Now, this is a kind of example of something that you might be doing if you were trying to scale up a sales organization and make it more self-service. An example of this, right? And these will be owned by various people. Mike might own the webinar attendance, the chief marketing officer, chief commercial officer might own the initial meetings and the conversion rate, and the chief product officer might own the site, the no-touch trial customer. Now, clearly, each one of these things is going to depend on a collaborative effort from different parts of those departments. You can't sign a no-touch trial customer without some collaboration from marketing and probably commercial as well, but it's being driven by Sarah, the chief product officer. So that's hopefully an illustration of what a objective and key result looks like, what an OKR looks like. What we do with this is we put this into a format, and the format is basically the same text here, but you can see it's organized in a certain way. In Q4, we will scale up our sales machine as measured by these key results owned by those people, right? Now, all we're doing here is we're setting a goal in a really clear fashion. In the next couple of slides, I'm going to go into the detail about why we set certain things in a certain way, what we're trying to achieve with them. But first of all, when we do these, we're often doing this in a particular context. So you might have a set of OKRs, a couple of objectives, each with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 key results. You might have up to 3 objectives. I recommend less than 3. And these would be for example, Q4 company OKRs. This is your OKRs for your company. Now, that context might be a different context. It might be your team, it might be a product group or whatever. We'll get into what that is later on. But what these represent is your strategy. So you've set a strategy, you're representing your strategy for this quarter in these OKRs. These are what we're going to get done in order to implement our strategy. And when I talk about that, it's really the strategy as relevant to that particular scope. So I might have company OKRs. If that's our company strategy, then this quarter we're going to achieve these objectives and key results, and that will help us move towards delivering our strategy and making our vision real. And you can apply that to any group, whatever group you have, whatever team you have, you might have a particular strategy. And what does that really mean in practice? It means that this quarter we are going to achieve these objectives and deliver those key results, right? Now let's get into detail on what those different areas mean. The time constraint is basically you're starting out by setting the objectives and key results. You have a period of time, usually 3 months. It doesn't have to be, but usually it's 3 months aligned with calendar quarters, because that's how most companies run. But some people do 6 months, some people do 4 months. There's all sorts of different ways of doing this. Try and make it aligned with the rest of your organization. And at the end of that, you grade or score your OKRs. Now, the scoring is not complicated. You just don't want to say, we've succeeded in this, it's red, it's green, it's yellow, we're partway through, partial success, we're full success, we failed, whatever it is. Now, that's what you're doing to define your success in delivering your key results, right? So during that time cycle. The next thing is objectives. Now, the purpose of the objective is to set direction and motivate action. So scale up our sales machine is a thing that we're going to try and do. This doesn't really explain a lot about it. That's what the key results are really there for. But what you're trying to do is use natural language. So we're trying to use natural language to inspire people, to motivate action, and to help people understand where we're going and what our strategy really means. The key results define success. So you're defining the start, the constraints, and success. So in each one of these key results, we have a metric, a name of a metric, average monthly webinar attendance. Now that's got to be defined, well defined, but we're also saying where we're starting, 10, and where we're going to, 100. We're going to get from 10 to 100 by the end of the quarter, and that should be something that we're measuring. Now, you can use multiple key results to put constraints around things to make sure that we're not just increasing webinar attendees without also increasing initial meetings, right? So both of these things have to be true. You might have different ways of doing this. The conversion rate, for example, has to go up as well. So you're not just saying, well, let's have more meetings that never convert. There's no point in that. Now, the purpose of doing this, the way you're doing this, I like to call this the micromanagement continuum, because the way you set these key results might be on the one side, might be like micromanagement, right? On that side, on this side, it might be micromanagement, right? Where you're being really defined, you're constraining things. And what that tends to mean is that people are less creative and less motivated and less interested and less engaged, right? On the other side, you can be very vague and you can have what I would call a vague vision peddling. And this is where people take being empowering a bit too far and they don't give enough direction. And what happens there is you might get a lot of energy and effort, but they go in all sorts of different directions. The sweet spot is somewhere in the middle, and you're constraining enough of the direction to get it lined up with the strategy, but giving people enough scope so that they're engaged and that they have real meaty problems to solve. And that sweet spot varies. There's no sort of, these are the correct OKRs. And this is all about you're trying to set goals but navigate this sweet spot on the micromanagement continuum, and it varies by team, by situation, and by leader. Like what you're actually trying to do and who's doing it really makes a difference here. So so when you're setting OKRs, think about this micromanagement continuum. Now, the last element was the owner. And the owner, as I said, writes the plan. Now, they're not the person who manages everybody who's doing this. Just because Mike, the CMO, has a particular OKR and the technical team, the engineering team have to do something for that, doesn't mean Mike has to manage the engineering team. Mike just writes the plan and gets those resources, gets those people in that team to commit. Are they committed to doing this or not? And Mike's kind of responsible for making sure they're committed to delivering the results that we need to deliver to meet this particular key result. Now, I'm going to give a couple of pieces of advice, a couple of tips for OKRs. The main topic here is that fewer OKRs is better. Okay, so a lot of people overdo OKRs and use OKRs for everything. So here we go. Number one, OKRs are not equal to your organizational chart. Just because you're a manager, just because you have a large team, just because you have a place in the organization does not mean you have to have your own set of OKRs. It may make more sense to sign up for, support, or deliver some other set of OKRs. Just duplicate them if necessary, because there's no point in adding more. Now, the reason for this, too many OKRs is bad, and it's even worse when it's linked to compensation, right? But too many OKRs is bad because when you have an organizational chart that looks like this, you've got a person somewhere down the bottom there, and when they look up, they look around, they've got their own OKRs, they've got their managers' OKRs, they've got their managers' OKRs, they've got the company OKRs, they've got some stakeholders' OKRs, they've got the product team they're working on OKRs. Oh my goodness, we're confused, right? And to got all of these different options of things that I have to do, I've got all these different key results I could be working on. So think about the experience of the employee and try and narrow down to the minimal set of OKRs that you need to do so that they can relatively easily figure out what they need to do and navigate their priorities. The fewer you have, the better your prioritization. People will be able to navigate this better. Now, the other thing that happens when you have lots of OKRs is you introduce change resistance. As soon as you set an OKR somewhere, nobody wants to change that. And that's a good thing. We don't want to be changing our OKRs regularly. But if you've set OKRs all across an organization like this, and then you do some work to align, you discover that somewhere along the line, things are not quite aligned up right. They're not in agreement. There's some disagreement between them. And when this is happening, especially at the individual level, if someone's got their own OKRs, as an individual, I've got my OKRs, then I can't change them. And so I can't align with someone else. So if you have too many OKRs, you'll spend so much time setting and aligning these OKRs and agreeing on them and debating them and so on that you just won't get any work done. What's much better is set the small number of OKRs, right? Have as few OKRs as possible, right? Use them to guide collaboration. So set a small number of OKRs. For example, you might have company OKRs here. You might have some product OKRs there for the product team. You might have a HR OKRs over there. You might have a specific product OKR here, and you might have an engineering OKR there. Now, whatever works for your organization, using these to guide the specific things we really need to do, the things that are really important for the organization and for our team. We set an OKR, but we don't want to have them everywhere. For someone who's in this organization, let's see if I can move my mouse. If someone's over here in the organization, they're in the engineering team, all I really need to worry about is I'm working on that product OKR and I'm working on this engineering OKR and I care about the company OKRs. And that's it, right? I'm not too fussed about everything else. Right. And so I have a relatively easy thing to navigate and it's relatively easy for me to line up with what I need to actually do. Now, the second thing to think about here is when you're talking about OKRs, often you'll have an executive team who are looking at OKRs. What they should look at is not all of those OKRs. They should only pay attention to the OKRs that really matter for them. So focus selectively and delegate where possible. You don't need to manage all the OKRs. Here, we might be looking at the company OKRs, and we might be looking at one specific critical product OKR that we really care about as a management team. The rest can be managed by our managers. We've hired people who are managing these things. They can look at those things. We want to focus on the things that are really important at the company level. And part of that is about making sure that you are actually delegating and empowering people. If there's some OKRs in part of the organization that matter, then that should be something that you empower those managers to do. And here there might be a critical HR OKR that we're also paying attention to. So you could select any OKRs that you want us to pay attention to as a management team, but try to pay attention to the minimal set that actually really matter for you and empower your managers and other people in your organization to manage the OKRs that they are responsible for. So in summary, OKRs are a time constraint, an objective, which is what we'll achieve, a definition of success, the key results, and owners. There's a whole lot of rules and sort of stuff that feels a bit like a cargo cult around how you set perfect OKRs and what the metrics should be and all that sort of stuff. If you understand the purpose of this, the actual concept behind this, then you can break the rules where it makes sense for you and your organization, because the reality is that your organization is different to Google and it's different to the people who wrote the books. So make sure that you're setting time constraints, objectives, that things you want to achieve, the key results, the definition of success that's going to engage your team, and defining owners in a way that really works for your organization. Now, I'm quite happy to share more of my thoughts on this. I've written a book called the OKR Operating System, or an ebook rather. It's about 70 pages and it's relatively easy to read. It's probably about 45 minutes, maybe an hour of reading time. It covers all sorts of things related to OKRs, including how you put this into practice, because setting goals on their own is not going to deliver you results. You actually want to set the goal and then write a plan. And in order to set the goal, you need to have a strategy. And you also need to be monitoring your regular daily operations, right? Your weekly operations and how things are going. And you need to be running a good meeting cadence and having great meetings that actually get things done, while you're also modifying your plans and changing what you're doing in relation to in response to what you're learning about your business. So have a look at the OKRoperating-system.net. It's a free ebook download. It's a PDF. It's currently at version 0.91. Maybe by the time you watch this, it might be, I might have a nicer cover for a start, but we'll see how it goes. But I'm trying to update this and put this on Kindle desktop publishing as well. So you might even find it on Amazon one of these days soon. But in the meantime, OKRoperating-system.net. Have a great week and scale well. Feel free to contact me if you think I can help with anything. Have a great day. Bye-bye.